No mai, haere mai. Welcome. I'm Bruce Munro, and with me is International Relations Specialist Professor Robert Patman. And this is Global Insight. South Korea has been in the news this week for all the wrong reasons, both tragic and concerning. But how important is South Korea in the international scheme of things? Welcome, Robert.
Morena, Bruce.
We've heard about this horrific Halloween weekend tragedy where 156, mostly young people, were killed in South Korea's capital, Seoul.
Yeah.
Viewers might have been surprised to know that Halloween is such a big deal in South Korea. Can you tell us, what does this tragedy tell us about the society, the economy and the politics of South Korea?
Well, it was a shocking episode, and it's really shocked South Korea. I mean, the country's in mourning. This occurred, of course, on the 31st of October. And I think Halloween has been so co-opted in South Korean society because there's always been a sizable American presence. There's 28,000 troops permanently stationed in South Korea to counterbalance the threat presented by North Korea, which is allied to China. And that arrangement's been in place quite a long time. I think there's big questions being asked about the policing. For example, there's something of a political backlash going on at the moment. Initially, the country was just deeply shocked and grief-stricken. But that's given way, I think, now to anger because the police had warnings about 4 hours before this crisis developed. Something like 100,000 people congregated in a very narrow area in South Korea, a street there. And there were people ringing the police. The police got about at least 11 phone calls before the tragedy developed in a 4-hour period. And there's questions, why was there no, and the South Korean authorities admitted there was no guidelines to handle an event of this nature. So that's reverberating. And I think in a sense, this has occurred when there were other protests going on in the city, political protests. So in a sense, I think there will be, some concerns within South Korean society that this was badly handled and preventable. And so we can expect, I think, some in due course for people to be held accountable for this episode. I mean, South Korea is a democracy and has been since 1987, so we can expect people to be held accountable for this. But we should point out, Bruce, for our viewers, that 156 people died, predominantly young South Koreans, but also 26 young foreign nationals. South Korea is a very popular place for people to visit, and we perhaps talk about that later.
Indeed. And North Korea has recently test-fired at least 23 missiles, including one that landed in the sea 26 kilometres south of the disputed border, maritime border between North and South Korea. Is this significant? Does this change anything for South Korea?
I think it is a significant escalation. The president of South Korea, Seok-Youl, made the point that this was almost a breach of South Korea's territorial integrity. The missile landed in international waters, but it was very close to where South Korea's territorial integrity kicks in, the boundary there. The South Koreans did respond immediately with the equivalent missile response. So the situation, and they have had, traded sort of launching of missiles. The two countries have traded the launching of missiles with their missiles landing in water. But it's a dangerous situation. Why is it dangerous? Earlier this year, North Korea changed its law so that it could use nuclear weapons on a preemptive basis, which rang some alarm bells. In addition, what has provoked the initial North Korean provocative launch close to South Korea seems to be South Korea's traditional yearly exercise with the Americans, which the North Koreans take particular exception to, because there's something like 240 warplanes involved, and they believe it's a prelude to an invasion of North Korea. The Americans completely dismiss this, as do the South Korean authorities, saying this is a standard military exercise that the two countries, which are close allies, carry out every year. And the Americans said it has only defensive purpose. But it is, I think, a significant escalation in long-term tensions between Kim Jong-un. The other thing was that the South Koreans are particularly angry that North Korea, in their view, was seeking to take advantage at a time when South Korean society was in mourning and had its guard down, so to speak, with this terrible tragedy on Halloween. So, and they also believe it shows the opportunist nature of the authoritarian regime in Pyongyang, led by Kim Jong-un.
How important a role do you think South Korea will play in global politics over this coming decade?
I think South Korea has potentially a really important role to play. I say that for both general and specific reasons. Generally, I think we live in an increasingly interconnected world where great powers can do less and less because the problems confronting all states do not respect borders. So increasingly, we're going to have international solutions, whether we like it or not, to many problems. That creates a space and autonomy for middle powers and small powers. South Korea is a country of 51 million people. It's a middle power. It's probably ranked, according to the Lowy Institute, about 5th in terms of its military capabilities in the Indo-Pacific, so it's quite formidable. And it certainly is not inferior to North Korea when it comes to military capabilities. But the reason I think it's important is because it's not just another middle power. What we've seen in the last decade is a spectacular rise in what some political scientists call soft power. South Korea has become one of the preeminent soft power players in the world. We've seen bands like BTS, this boy band, has enormous appeal and was invited even to address the UN General Assembly. And the popular culture of South Korea has gone global. You've had movies like Parasite, which was the first first foreign, I should say, movie to win the Best Picture award at the Oscars. You've also had a TV series, or Netflix series, I should say, Squid Game. Again, so in 2018, South Korea hosted the very successful Winter Games. And then, of course, you have South Korea, and this sort of ties into our first point of discussion today, has become a very popular destination for young people. Not just to visit because it's the home to groups like BTS, but also to study. There was about 4,000 to 5,000 foreign students studying in South Korea in 2003. By 2019, that figure had leapt to over 150,000. So South Korea, in terms of its soft power, has its ability to attract. When we talk about soft power, we're really talking about the ability to be influential and attract the attention of others. And we've seen in the last decade, South Korea has become almost a superpower in soft power terms. So that's a very interesting development, but it is somewhat constrained by geopolitics, which is next door, of course, the North Korean problem. There's been this long-running problem that's hung over South Korea's. It's been in the shadow of this problem for some time. But I think what many diplomats feel is that South Korea may be poised to move from a powerful state which was somewhat constrained by a preoccupation with a troublesome neighbour to a middle power that's seeking to raise its horizons and look further afield. And one step in this direction is North-South Korea's decision to apply to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, which consists of 11 countries and which includes New Zealand and Australia. This, I think, is a willingness by South Korea to become a more active multilateral player and move beyond the limits of geopolitics locally. So, yeah, I think South Korea has every possibility of becoming an influential middle power in the next decade.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. Noho ora mai.